This is Harsh Rules, I'm Ben Harsh, and today we're going to learn to play Fire in the Lake. Fire in the Lake, the second edition, was released in 2018 by GMT Games and designed by Mark Herman and Volko Ruhnke. The first edition was released in 2014. This game supports up to 4 players and takes about 3 hours to play. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to recognize the Harsh Rules Patreon supporters that help make content like this possible. If you'd like to support the channel, head over to patreon.com/harshrules to learn more. And once again, thank you for your support. I would also like to take a moment for a special thanks to our super supporter, Rob B., also known as Messin' Up Rules over on Board Game Geek. Rob graciously sent me a copy of Fire in the Lake for this breakdown series. Welcome back to the Harsh Rules breakdown for Fire in the Lake. In this episode, we're going to look at card events, and then we're going to work our way through the Coup Round. Let's begin with a quick recap on card events. On the sequence of play flowchart, when the first faction takes their turn, they have 3 options. The first path is for playing an operation, the second path an operation with a special activity, and the third path is to play the event on the card. Most cards have 2 event options. An unshaded option, which often favors the counterinsurgents, and a shaded option which favors the insurgents. The second faction may only play a card event if the first faction conducted an operation paired with a special activity, in other words, the second path. When a faction executes an event, it carries out the event text literally and in order, sometimes involving actions or decisions by other factions. Unless otherwise specified, the executing faction makes all selections involved in implementing the text. If another faction is specified or selected to take an action, that faction decides the details of the action. Be aware that some card events have lasting effects. Let's take a closer look at what this means. Some event text, unshaded, shaded, or both, will be marked momentum in all caps. This refers to lasting event effects. When executing such text, place the card in view near the draw pile. It will probably have effects specified to last until the next Coup Round's reset phase, when the card is discarded. Some events will be labeled with a faction name and the term capability. Capability events last for the rest of the game. Special markers are provided to keep track of these. One side of the marker represents the unshaded event, and the other side the shaded event. These are placed in the capabilities box on the game board. To help remind players that a capability is in play, set out the executed capabilities event cards near the affected players as added reminders. Pivotal events are event cards that have preconditions for play and preempt other event cards, including faction order. The executing faction must select the event to play the pivotal event card. Each faction begins the medium and full scenarios with a pivotal event card unique to it. A faction may play its pivotal event to cancel a currently played event card, including eligibility order, if the faction is eligible, and the red precondition on the card is met, and the first eligible faction has not yet done anything, and no coup is showing as the next card. The procedure is as follows. When a pivotal event card is played, the faction interrupts the usual sequence of play by placing its pivotal event card on the played event card and executing the pivotal event. The new eligibility sequence follows, and the pivotal event stays in the played card pile as normal. Pivotal event cards may also be used to trump other players attempting to use their pivotal event card. The VC may play its pivotal event on top of another faction's pivotal event, canceling it. Arvin may do so to US or NVA. NVA may do so to US, and US may not do so. A canceled pivotal event card is returned to its owner for possible later use. And now that we've looked at the various types of cards that can be played, let's move on to the Coup Round. Next, let's walk through the Coup Round. We'll begin with a brief recap from the first episode to set the stage. Gameplay will continue through these cards until a coup card appears in the preview. This triggers a monsoon on the current card in play, which limits players' actions. Once the active card with the monsoon is played through, the coup card is brought into play. With coup cards, the current campaign of the war ends. Players will then work through a string of required activities to conduct victory checks, manage game pieces on the board, gather resources, and then reset the board for the next campaign season. As we just saw, there are two card reveals that signal the end of a gameplay season: the coup card and the card preceding it, which is plagued with a monsoon. Let's take a closer look at both of these. When the coup card appears as the next card in play, the current card in play is tagged with a monsoon marker. Thematically, monsoons limit operations and some special activities. Sweep and march operations are prohibited while the monsoon-marked card is in play. U.S. special activities for airstrikes and airlifts are limited to 2 spaces. Also, no pivotal event cards are allowed to be played. Coup cards indicate the end of a round of card play. Each of these campaign seasons represents 1 to 2 years of the Vietnam War. During this period, the Republic of Vietnam endured a number of coups. Thematically, this is represented by up to 6 coup cards that are randomized into the deck. The number of coup cards to insert in a deck is dictated by the length of the scenario. When a coup card appears in gameplay, it will be placed on top of the Republic of Vietnam's leader space, updating the Republic's leadership. Each leader adds a lasting event to the game as printed on the card. There are also 2 failed event cards. These failed coup cards still trigger the coup round, but once resolved, they are placed beneath the current RVN leader. And now that we have a better understanding of monsoons and the coup cards, let's look at the coup round. At the bottom of the sequence of play flowchart, there is a track of 6 spaces for each step of the coup round. The game also provides a coup card marker to track your progress through these steps. Next, we're going to walk through each of these to better understand how they function. The first phase of the coup round is to conduct a victory check. If any faction has met its victory conditions, the game ends to determine a winner and rank order. Otherwise, continue with the coup round by completing the remaining phases. After conducting the final coup cards round, if a clear winner is not present, the faction with the highest victory margin wins. The victory margin is the amount a faction is beyond or short of in its victory conditions. To get accustomed to victory checks, let's calculate each faction from where they stand at the beginning of the game. The VC faction victory marker begins at 23 victory points. This total is comprised of a victory point for each base on the map. At the beginning of the short game, the VC have 5 bases on the map for 5 victory points. The VC also receive victory points for each province or city space in opposition to the Republic of South Vietnam. Passive opposition rewards victory points equal to the population level, and active opposition awards victory points at double the population level. The NVA faction victory marker begins at 10 victory points. This total is comprised of a victory point for each base on the map. In the short game, the NVA begin with 8 bases on the map. The NVA also receive victory points for each province or city space under NVA control. Many spaces begin under NVA control but have no population and thus reward no victory points. The short games with the NVA controlling Quang Tri, which is worth 2 victory points. The US faction begins the short game with 38 victory points. The US receive a victory point for each troop and base in their available box. Then they also receive victory points for city and province bases with support. Passive support rewards victory points at the population level, and active support awards double the population in victory points. The Arvan faction begins the short game with 41 victory points. This total is comprised of 18 points for the patron marker, and victory points for each province and city space with coin control based on their population number. The next phase in the coup round is regarding resources. There are several steps to this, so let's take it one at a time. The first step is sabotage. In this step, look at each line of communication on the game board. Remember, lines of communication are the highways and Mekong River lines on the map with an econ value printed on them. The insurgent factions may sabotage these lines of communication if they have more insurgent guerrilla pieces on them than coin pieces. Now, the insurgent faction may also sabotage lines of communication that are adjacent to city spaces with no coin control. So even if there are no insurgent guerrillas on a line of communication, if an adjacent city space has lost coin of control, then that line of communication can also be sabotaged. For example, on this graphic, Kontoon is not under coin control. Therefore, Route 14, which is worth 1 econ, and Route 19, worth 1 econ, can now be sabotaged. For routes between cities, both must be under coin control to prevent the line of communication from being sabotaged. So if one city loses coin control, then the line of communication between them can be sabotaged. Now, it's important to note that there are only 15 double-sided sabotage/terror markers in the game. The VC faction is limited to those 15 markers for placing either sabotage or terror on the map. So if you run out of markers, you cannot conduct any more sabotage. But the VC faction also gets to choose which spaces to place those sabotage markers. The next step of the resources phase is to degrade the trail. If any space in Laos or Cambodia is coin controlled, then degrade the trail by 1 box. In the next step, we're going to calculate Arvan earnings. First, add the aid marker value to the Arvan resource counter. Then, add the econ value of all lines of communication that have no sabotage markers. There are a total of 15 econ points available on lines of communication. Take the total econ value of 15 minus the sabotage lines of communication econ values to find this number. Then adjust the econ marker to the updated level. Next, we're going to update the insurgent earnings. To add to the insurgent faction's resources for the VC, count the number of bases on the map. For the NVA, it's the number of NVA bases in Laos and Cambodia plus 2 times the trail value. In the final step, subtract from the aid marker 3 times the number of pieces in the US casualties box. In the support phase, factions may spend resources to affect popular support and opposition. For the counterinsurgent factions, the US and Arvan, this is pacification. For the insurgent faction, this is called agitation, but only the VC can do this. For coin pacification, the US and then Arvan may spend Arvan resources to build support in a combined total of up to 4 provinces and/or cities. To do so, the space must have coin control, at least 1 police cube, and the pacifying faction's troops. Also remember that the U.S. may not spend resources below the marked total econ level. Once all terror markers are removed in the space, the faction may spend resources to shift the space one level towards active support, to a maximum of 2 levels per space total during each support phase. Then, for every 3 Arvin resources spent, remove 1 terror marker. Insurgent agitation works in a similar but simplified fashion. The VC faction may spend resources to encourage opposition in up to 4 spaces with VC pieces and no coin control. Then, for every 1 VC resource spent, remove 1 terror marker. Once no terror is in place, the VC may spend 1 resource to shift the space 1 level towards active opposition to a maximum of 2 levels per space total during each support phase. The next phase in the coup round is redeploy. In this phase, redeploy forces as follows without adjusting coin or NVA control until afterwards. Redeploy has a number of steps. First, in Laos and Cambodia, remove all US and Arvin pieces. US troops go to the out-of-play box, all other pieces to available boxes. A note from the designers, the removal from Laos and Cambodia represents the political cost of too lengthy an operation inside a neutral country. The next step of the redeploy phase is for Arvin redeployment. The Arvin faction must move its troops from lines of communication and provinces without coin bases, and may move any other Arvin troops to any cities without NVA control, any US or Arvin bases, or Saigon. Arvin then may move any police to any lines of communication or to any coin-controlled spaces within South Vietnam. A note to remember is that US forces do not redeploy. This is just for Arvin troops and police. Then, in the third step of the redeploy phase, the NVA faction may redeploy. The NVA faction then may move NVA troops only from any map spaces to any NVA bases, even if the space is coin controlled. Now in step 4, adjust coin and NVA control to reflect the previous moves. Only conduct step 5 if and only if it's the final game round. If this is the case, end the game and determine victory. The next phase in the coup round is for commitment. Remember, in the previous redeploy phase, we didn't touch any of the US forces. Commitment is all about them. Please note, if you're playing the first edition of the game, the commitment rules have been updated for the second edition. There are a number of steps in the commitment phase, so let's walk through them one at a time. The first section of commitment is around rotation of forces. If not the final round, take 1 and 3 US troops and all base casualty pieces out of play. Then return all US-led irregular casualty pieces to their available box. Then the US places all other US troop casualties into any coin-controlled spaces, lines of communication, or Saigon. The US then may move US troops totaling up to 10 minus the number of casualties just placed on the map, plus up to 2 bases among the US available box, any coin-controlled spaces, lines of communication, and Saigon. Now, we've just shifted some pieces around the board, but what does it all mean? Remember, the US faction's victory condition is based on their commitment to Vietnam. So the more troops and bases in the available forces box that the US has, the more victory points they have to win the game. US-led irregulars do not count towards victory points, and pieces on the map or pieces that are casualties or out of play also do not count towards victory points. These US game pieces are actively involved in the Vietnam War. This is important to understand for the impact of our next step. Once the US pieces have been positioned, it's time to check for control and adjust any victory markers once more. The next step is called withdrawal. For every 2 US pieces, rounded down, just moved from the map to available, the VC may shift one population by 1 level towards opposition. No space may be shifted by more than 1 level. Population shifted may otherwise be spread among spaces as desired. And a note from the designers, commitment is the main time that the US commits forces from available to South Vietnam or withdraws them the other way. In other words, any US pieces moved to the available box communicates a withdrawal of US forces from Vietnam, and thus the South Vietnamese population becomes more opposed to the Republic of South Vietnam's regime. The final step of the coup round is the reset phase. Here you will need to complete a number of small steps to prepare for the next play session. First, if the trail is 0, improve to 1. If it is a 4, degrade to 3. Next, remove all remaining terror and sabotage markers. After that, flip all guerrillas and special forces to underground. Then, place any momentum cards that were in effect onto the played cards. Their events no longer apply. After that, mark all factions eligible. In other words, move each faction's markers to the eligible factions box. And finally, play the next card from the draw deck and reveal the draw deck's new top card. The next round of play will then begin and will continue until the next coup card appears on deck. And now that we've covered card play and the coup round, you should be ready to start playing Fire in the Lake. If you found this video helpful, please give me a like and share with your friends. To be the first notified when the next episode of Harsh Rules becomes available, please hit the bell icon for notifications. And as always, this has been Harsh for Harsh Rules. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.